Hi again, Mark here from Talkingbass. Today we're going to look at the 3 best methods you can work on for learning the notes of the bass fretboard. They're all pretty good, but I'm going to list them in order of quality, so be sure to stick around for the final method, which is best by far. Also, I'll be expanding on each of these tips over the next 3 lessons, so be sure to subscribe to get the notifications each week. So, method number 1 is working through exercises. Now, there are many different exercises that you can use for learning the notes on the neck, but some are better than others. In finding a good exercise, you want to be working on each note in isolation and in a non-linear fashion. You want to avoid only working through the notes in alphabetical order because you'll get caught up in reciting a list. You want to break up the alphabetic order so you're forced into thinking of each note in isolation. And this is where the cycle of fourths or fifths can be really useful. So, as an example, if I was to list the notes in the cycle of fourths, C, F, B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, B, E, A, D, G, and back to C, I could simply look for those notes in turn on a single string. So let's take the E string as an example. So if I just work through those notes of the cycle of fourths, we would have C, and then F, B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, then B, E, A, D, G, and back to C. I could then try the same exercise on each string in turn. So we could try the A string, so C, F, B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, and so on. Then for the D string, so C, F, B flat, E flat, etc. And the G string, C, F, B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, etc. Now, if I was to try that same exercise, but just working through the notes in alphabetical order, I'd only be learning the relative distance between each note. So I could try that on the A string just as C, D, E, F, G, A, B. And that doesn't really help at all. I'm just working through that list, and I'm just thinking up a note, up a note, up a note. It doesn't help in the same way. So there are many different ways that you can use an exercise like that. You can try playing scales, arpeggios, anything through the cycle. And those kind of exercises are good for learning the notes on the neck, but you do need to know the cycle of fourths or fifths as a prerequisite, and they might not be as accessible to beginner bass players for that reason. So I think a better, more focused exercise for beginners is that of page-written tests. In these test sheets, you're presented with a note on the page and you have to find and play it on the bass. Simple. So here you can see an example of notes being written out, 1 per bar. You can just work through sheet after sheet of these, playing through them slowly, see the note, find the note, and then play the note. So that's a simple concept, but it's not so easy to work on in practice. Because there are so many iterations of the same note on a bass fretboard, for instance, a G, we could have G, 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 there's many Gs there. If you just see the note G written on the page, it's hard to know which one to go for. Now you could just try playing any G that you feel like, but that's not a very systemized way of addressing every note. Now instead, you can work on these exercises in focused areas. Now I'll be working through a bunch of these exercises in next week's lesson, but as an example, let's take only the first 3 fret markers on the E string as a focus, okay? So we've got G, A, and B, 3rd fret, 5th fret, and 7th fret, okay? So we could try out writing a sheet of bars testing us solely on those 3 notes, which would look something like this. So if I was to play through the first 8 bars of that exercise, we'd get the following, with a 1 bar count in. 1, 2, 3, 4. G, 2, 3, 4. B, 2, 3, 4. G, 2, 3, 4. A, 2, 3, 4. B, 2, 3, 4. A, 2, 3, 4. G, 2, 3, 4. A, 2, 3, 4. Now, that was obviously a really simple example of how this testing method works, but you can take this much further by focusing on a single string, a single position over 2 strings, and much, much more. These exercises are just a simple way of being introduced to the notes on the neck, especially for beginners. Now, as a beginner, you'll know the alphabet. So all you have to then learn is the appropriate position of those notes for the area in each test. So there's no cycle of fourths, no scales, arpeggios, or music notation required. I'll be working through a whole set of these exercises next lesson, so stay tuned for that. Method number 2 is reading chord charts. Now this is pretty similar to the sheet tests that we just looked at, in that we're seeing note names written out on the page and we have to find the notes on the bass. But with chord charts, we're taken to the next level in that we're being tested with applied musical content. And this makes chord charts a great next step after trying the test sheets. If you've never seen a chord chart before, they do come in one of several flavours, but in every case we're seeing a set of chord symbols outlining the chord progression of a song or piece. So this could be a lead sheet like this, where we have a melody written out with the chords placed above. Or you might see slash chord notation like this, with the chords again written above the stave and the slashes indicate the beats in the bar. There are many ways of writing out chord progressions for a tune, but in every case the principle is the same. As bass players, we've been provided with the basic harmony of the piece, and it's our job to create a bass line on the fly. Now, this can be very easy or much more difficult depending on the style of music and requirements of that style. For example, a pop chart like this might only require me to read the root notes of each chord and play a simple comp pattern like this. 3, 4, 1. But a jazz part like this might require me to play a walking bass line through the changes, which would sound more like this. Now, that requires a much greater understanding of the harmony and the style itself. So this makes chord charts a little more sophisticated for our note practice because we've got more to think about. We have to think about how we can create a musically interesting line, and if we're to play anything other than root notes, then we need to understand chord tones and the various chord construction principles, which are the basics of harmony. Because of these extra elements, it makes chord charts a much more interesting way of practicing the notes on the neck, and you'll learn a lot more about the instrument in general. As a beginner, I definitely stick to basic pop tunes with simple root note requirements. That way you can just read the letter for each chord, so that'd be A for A major or B for B minor, ignoring all of the extra qualities and numbers, so you can focus on a particular area of the bass. Now, a great way of practicing this is by taking chord charts from commercial buskers books and piano books and just playing along to the original recordings. You could take something like the Beatles anthology book and then just play along, to the original. Now, all you need to do there is just read the root notes and play along. Stick to a low area on the bass to begin with, and then as you get a little more confident, just start to move up into higher areas for a little more interest in the tone and register. Now, finally, let's look at method number 3, the best method out there, reading music. Now, the previous methods all had the underlying practice of transferring written notes on the page to the instrument. So we see a note, we find the note, and then we play the note. Well, with reading standard music notation, we go beyond reading simple alphabetic letters. We learn the notes on the stave, the rhythm, the dynamics, and every other aspect of music that you can write on the page. When we play by reading music, we learn the notes on the bass to an almost instinctive level. You develop the knowledge of the fretboard in such a way that there's no delay. There's no time to be thinking, that's an F, where's there an F? Oh, there it is. It has to be instantaneous, and you develop that skill in a progressive, systemized way. The same applies to rhythm as well. You learn all the different subdivisions of a beat and a bar, so you can fluently speak those notes as if you were reading a book. Now, this can obviously seem like a big task on the face of it. To many non-reading bass players, learning to read seems like a huge undertaking and one where there's no real structured road to success. The advice is always the same. Learn the notes and then just practice reading, which is not particularly helpful to a beginner, especially if you don't even know the notes on the bass yet. But trust me, it's not as difficult to get started and develop as you might think. You just need the right guidance and path to learning. So the key is to go right back to absolute basics. Even if you've been playing a number of years, go right back to being a beginner again and work through in small progressive baby steps. Start with the natural notes in one area and learn one string at a time. This means you only have to start with 3 or 4 notes on an E string, let's say, so E, F, G, and A. No rhythms, just notes, and stick with it until it seems easy. Then add the next string, the A string. Practice that in isolation, then add it to the E string, and so on. So you practice the notes in one low position, then practice the rhythms in isolation, and then you add them both together, and before you know it, you'll be reading. So, as a simple example, here are the natural notes, no sharps or flats, in that first position on the bass. So we're just going to look at the first 5 frets here, no open strings. So we have E, F, G, A, then on the A string, B, C, and D, then on the D string, E, F, and G, and then on the G string, A, B, and C. So that's the first step, just getting those natural notes down. Don't worry about flats or sharps for the minute, just get those natural notes down. So we have E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C in order. Now, if we just take the notes on the E string, E, F, G, and A, we just have to learn their position on the stave, which you can see here. So we've got E on the ledger line below, then the next space up, F, bottom line on the stave is G, and then that next space is A. So E, F, G, and A. E, F, G, A. Next, once you know those 4 notes on the bass and on the stave, you can just use a simple exercise sheet like this. If I play through the first 8 bars at a slow tempo, we've got the following. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. E, 2, 3, 4. G, 2, 3, 4. F, 2, 3, 4. A, 2, 3, 4. G, 2, 3, 4. F, 2, 3, 4. E, 2, 3, 4. So this is the key to learning to read. You take it slowly in simple steps and don't rush. Keep it as easy as you can at every stage. Random notes like this avoid you learning the music because there's no real patterns to memorize, and as you add the notes one string at a time and then through the various other positions on the bass, you'll gradually learn every note on the bass without even realizing it. You're just learning music. So I'll be covering the basics of reading music in the next few weeks, but for now, if you really want to improve your reading, just go check out the Simple Steps to Sight reading course over at Talkingbass. That's a huge structured method for reading that I created to take you from the absolute basics all the way through to a professional sight reading standard, all in really simple steps. I've provided a link in the card and the info below, so go check that out. Okay, so that's 3 great methods that you can try if you want to learn your notes on the fretboard. We've got test sheets and exercises, chord charts, and best of all, music reading. As I mentioned, I'll be expanding on each of these methods over the next few weeks, so subscribe to the channel to get notifications on those releases and visit Talkingbass for hundreds more lessons on every topic imaginable. Okay, I'll see you next week. Thank you.